What made you homeschool your kid? My daughter Leah texted me during lunch. Dad, there's a lockdown. Someone has a gun. Before I could respond, more texts came in. Our teacher says it's fake. He won't let us hide. I spilled my drink across my shirt getting up, already calling the school while running for my truck. Main office, this is room 203. My daughter says there's an active shooter. The teacher won't let them hide. The line went silent for a moment before she responded in that careful tone people use with crazy people. Sir, all of our teachers are following lockdown protocol. I was already speeding out of the parking lot. He's not following it. They're sitting at their desks exposed. She sighed like I was being dramatic. Mr. Blackberry is our most experienced teacher with 20 years of perfect evaluations. Leah texted again while the secretary was talking. I can hear gunshots 2 rooms away, and my vision blurred with panic. There's someone with a gun and the kids aren't hidden. The secretary's voice turned cold and formal, like she still didn't believe me. We're doing the best we can. I hung up on her and tried calling Leah, but it went straight to voicemail. I called 911 while weaving through traffic, nearly clipping a minivan, but they just kept saying officers were already responding. I hit the school parking lot doing 60 and slammed on the brakes when I saw the police barricade. I abandoned my car and ran to the nearest cop, shoving my phone in his face to show Leah's texts. My daughter's teacher won't let them hide. Look, room 203. He glanced at the screen, but pushed my phone away and pointed toward the gathering crowd of parents. Sir, step back. This is an active situation and SWAT is handling it. I grabbed his vest desperately. Then tell SWAT about room 203. He physically shoved me backward and turned away to talk into his radio about crowd control, not about my daughter. 14 minutes had passed since Leah's last text, and I couldn't breathe properly. I ran around the building to the construction site where they're building the new science wing, found the chain-link fence, and started climbing. The metal tore into my palms, but I didn't care. I dropped down the other side and ran into the building. That's when I heard it. Gunshots from inside the main building. The alarm was screaming as I reached through the broken glass, slicing my arm open on the shards, and unlocked the door from inside. I sprinted toward room 203 before 2 officers appeared and one tackled me to the ground. My daughter's in 203 and they're not hidden, I screamed while he pressed my face into the floor, but he just dragged me back through the construction area and literally threw me outside, saying if I came back, I'd be arrested. I ran back around to the front entrance and somehow made it to the main hallway where I could finally see room 203's door. It was locked, and I could hear the teacher inside telling everyone to calm down or detention for everyone. I pounded on the door screaming, Leah, and heard her muffled voice cry, Dad? From inside, followed by a loud click. Mr. Blackberry locked the door from the inside. I grabbed a trophy case and ripped the fire extinguisher off the wall, hammering it against the door handle over and over, but the doors were reinforced. The secretary appeared, panting and red-faced from climbing the stairs, and started screaming about destroying property. Give me the keys! I roared at her, and she actually stepped backward in fear before saying only the principal had classroom keys. When I finally smashed through the glass and looked inside, all the kids were huddled in the corner against Blackberry's orders with some hiding under desks, and Leah saw me and screamed, Dad! While Blackberry stood at his board still holding his marker. Everyone return to your seats immediately, he commanded. But then SWAT burst in behind me, and Blackberry turned to them saying, This parent has completely lost his mind and disrupted my classroom. I was calling my wife and telling her Leah was okay while Leah clung to me, hyperventilating and sobbing, when the principal rushed in with security. You assaulted me! She screamed, her voice going shrill and hysteric. Jay, he tried to kill me with that chair! She was already on her phone while I held Leah, pacing back and forth and gesticulating wildly. You've traumatized every student in this building. 200 children who will need counseling. Then she interrupted herself to make another call. Yes, hello? We have a violent intruder who assaulted me with a weapon. Yes, premeditated assault. She described me like I was the actual shooter, never mentioning Blackberry keeping kids exposed, never mentioning why I did what I did. Later I learned the actual shooter was a 17-year-old senior who SWAT caught barricaded in a supply closet after he'd already shot 2 windows and put the art teacher in the ICU. When the real police arrived 6 minutes later, she pointed at me first and said, That's him, the one who attacked me. 2 cops immediately grabbed my arms while the principal kept jabbing her finger at me. He used that trophy case as a weapon. She was practically screaming while Leah pressed harder against my side, her whole body shaking so bad I could feel it through my torn shirt. The bigger cop started pulling my right arm back, but Leah wouldn't let go of my shirt and started crying harder. Please don't take my dad. More officers pushed through the doorway, and one grabbed my other arm, while the principal kept going on about how I'd threatened her life. I tried to tell them about Blackberry refusing to let the kids hide, but they were already yanking me away from Leah. She reached for me, screaming, "Dad!" over and over while one officer held her back. My hands got pulled behind my back, and I heard that click of handcuffs going on while the cops started reading charges. Trespassing on the school property, vandalism, assault with a deadly weapon. The metal was too tight on my wrists, and I could see other parents in the hallway filming everything on their phones. 2 paramedics showed up with a medical kit and started looking at my arms, which were still bleeding pretty bad from the broken glass. They cleaned the cuts with something that stung like crazy, while I kept trying to explain about room 203 and how the teacher wouldn't let them hide during an active shooter situation. The paramedics nodded, but I could tell they weren't really listening, just kept dabbing at the wounds and putting on bandages. One of them asked if I'd been drinking or taking any drugs, which made me want to scream. Through the classroom door, I saw my wife rush in and grab Leah, who was still sobbing uncontrollably. The principal immediately started telling her how I'd gone completely insane and attacked school property. My wife just held Leah tighter and followed us out as the cops walked me down the hallway. Every parent had their phone out recording me getting marched past in handcuffs, like I was the actual criminal here. Some were whispering to each other, and I heard one say something about me being the crazy dad who lost it. The shame burned through my chest, but not as bad as seeing Leah's face when they put me in the back of the police car. At the station, they took me straight to booking, where some bored-looking officer started the whole process. He rolled my fingers one by one on the ink pad, then onto the cards while asking basic questions about my name and address. They made me stand against the wall for photos from the front and both sides while I stood there in my ripped and bloody clothes. The booking officer pushed some papers at me to sign, but I told him I wasn't signing anything without a lawyer. He just shrugged like he'd heard it 1,000 times before and moved on to the next form. They took my belt and shoes and wallet and put everything in a plastic bag before walking me to the holding cell. Inside were 3 other guys, and one of them was watching the news on his phone. "They caught that kid who shot up the school," he said to nobody in particular. "Says here some parent went nuts too and attacked the principal." My stomach turned when I realized they were already spinning the story. Another guy looked at my bloody shirt and bandaged arms and asked if I was the dad from the news. Before I could answer, the first guy read more from his phone about how the art teacher was in critical condition and might not make it. The news kept calling me the parent who went berserk and caused additional chaos during an already dangerous situation. Hours passed before they finally let me make my phone call. My wife answered on the first ring and immediately told me Leah wouldn't sleep and kept checking all the doors and windows. I could hear Leah crying in the background, asking when I was coming home. My wife's voice cracked when she said Leah kept asking if the bad man was going to come to our house now. It killed me that I couldn't be there to help her feel safe. She told me she'd already called around for lawyers and would figure out bail money somehow. The next morning, they brought me to the courthouse for the bail hearing, still wearing the same bloody clothes from yesterday. The prosecutor stood up and described me like I was some violent maniac who posed a serious threat to the school staff and students. He went on about the thousands of dollars in property damage and how I'd terrorized an entire school already dealing with a shooting. The judge looked at me over her glasses, while the prosecutor recommended high bail to ensure public safety. My court-appointed lawyer barely said anything except that I had no prior record and stable employment. The judge set bail at $10,000 and issued a no-contact order for the entire school campus, including any school events. She said I couldn't go within 500 feet of the property or any school staff members. My wife had somehow gotten the bail money together and picked me up that afternoon. The ride home was quiet, except for her telling me about Leah's panic attacks. When we got home, I watched Leah jump every time a door closed or a car drove by too fast. She wouldn't sit with her back to any door and kept asking me to check the locks, even though I'd just checked them. My jaw hurt from clenching it so tight, and I couldn't stop pacing around the house checking windows I knew were already locked. That evening, my wife told me she'd found a defense attorney named Alejandra Guerra who specialized in cases like mine. We met with her the next day, and the first thing she said was to stay completely off social media. She started making lists of evidence we'd need, and witnesses who saw what really happened. "This is going to get ugly," she warned us, while writing down names of parents who might testify. My phone buzzed while Alejandra was still writing, and I saw my boss's name on the screen. I stepped outside to take the call, and he didn't waste time with small talk. He told me I was on administrative leave without pay until the criminal charges were resolved. "Company policy," he said. "Nothing personal, but they couldn't have someone facing assault charges working with clients. I stood there in the parking lot staring at the concrete while he explained about COBRA insurance and how I could appeal once everything was settled. The mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks, and I felt my chest getting tight thinking about the numbers. Back inside, I told my wife what happened and watched her face go pale. She grabbed my hand under the table while Alejandra kept talking about depositions and discovery, but I could barely focus. That night after we got home and put Leah to bed, my wife and I stood in the kitchen whispering. She kept saying she was grateful Leah was alive, but her voice shook when she asked how we'd pay the bills. I wanted to be mad at her for worrying about money, but I was thinking the same thing. We went back and forth about whether I should have just waited for the police to handle it. Neither of us was wrong, and we both knew it. She was scared about losing the house, and I was scared I'd failed to protect our daughter the right way. We ended up just holding each other in the dark kitchen, not saying anything. The next morning over breakfast, we both agreed Leah needed to see someone professional right away. I promised I wouldn't go anywhere near the school, even though it killed me to say it. She found a therapist named Lucia Lively, who specialized in trauma, and could see Leah that week. It felt like the system was winning by keeping me away from my own daughter's school, but we didn't have a choice. I spent the morning refreshing news sites and saw the school district had released a statement. They praised their staff for showing calm leadership during the crisis and called me an unauthorized intruder who complicated the response. I watched the local news anchor read it with this serious face like I was the real problem that day. My phone dinged with a Facebook message from someone named Cameron Fox, who I didn't recognize. He said he was a parent who'd been in the hallway that day and had recorded some video on his phone. He wanted to meet privately, because he wasn't sure who to trust with what he'd captured. I immediately forwarded it to Alejandra, who told me to meet him, but be careful. 2 days later, I drove Leah to her first appointment with Lucia, while she sat in the back seat, asking if the therapist would make her talk about everything. I told her she only had to share what she felt comfortable with, but I knew she needed this. In the waiting room, I could hear muffled voices through the door and caught glimpses of Leah showing Lucia how she couldn't sit with her back to any door now. She kept moving her chair around until she could see both the door and window at the same time. I sat there feeling completely useless while my daughter tried to explain why she needed to see all the exits. An hour later, Lucia came out and said Leah did great, but it would take time. On the drive home, Leah was quiet, and I didn't push her to talk about it. That afternoon, I got an email from someone named Bryant McCullough, saying he was the district's investigator looking into the incident. He requested an interview to get my side of the story for their internal review. I forwarded it to Alejandra, who immediately called and told me not to respond. She said the district was trying to build a case to protect themselves, not find the truth about what happened. The parent group chat for Leah's grade was blowing up my phone with notifications. I finally opened it and saw parents arguing about whether I'd made things worse or saved lives. Some woman named Jennifer said I'd traumatized her son more than the actual shooter did. Another parent wrote that she would have done the exact same thing if it was her kid. People were taking sides and getting nasty with each other. Our whole community was splitting apart over this. Someone posted a petition to ban me from all school events, and within an hour it had 40 signatures. Then someone else started a counter-petition supporting me, and that got signatures too. I had to mute the whole chat, because reading it was making me sick. Alejandra called the next morning saying she'd filed official records requests with everyone involved. She wanted the 911 call logs to prove I'd reported the danger before breaking in. She requested all SWAT reports about their response, and specifically about room 203. She asked for every email between school staff about the lockdown procedures and all written safety policies. She said, building our defense meant exposing every crack in their system. The district had 30 days to respond, but she expected them to drag it out as long as possible. 3 days after his first message, Cameron Fox texted asking to meet at a coffee shop parking lot. I got there early and waited in my car watching for anyone following me. He pulled up in a blue Honda and walked over looking nervous. He kept checking over his shoulder while he pulled out his phone. The video was shaky, but clear enough to see everything. You could hear the principal screaming at someone off camera about property damage. Then the camera turned and showed me at the door, without any weapon, just knocking with my fist. The audio picked up Blackberry's voice from inside the classroom telling students about detention. Cameron fast-forwarded to another clip showing the principal on her phone describing me like I was armed and dangerous. Relief flooded through me seeing proof I hadn't done what she claimed. Cameron said he'd been scared to come forward because his wife worked for the district. He wasn't sure if sharing the video would help me or just make things worse for his family. I told him I understood and asked if I could show it to my lawyer. He said yes, but asked me not to post it anywhere yet. He needed time to figure out the right way to handle it. I thanked him probably 10 times before he left. Back home, I showed the video to my wife and watched her shoulders relax for the first time in days. She kept replaying the part where you could hear Blackberry talking about detention while gunshots echoed in the background. We both knew one video wouldn't fix everything, but at least we had something real to fight back with. Lucia's office had toys on low shelves and soft chairs that made everything feel less scary when we brought Leah in 2 days later. Leah sat between us on the couch, picking at the hem of her shirt, while Lucia explained she was just going to ask some questions about what happened. My wife held Leah's hand as she started talking about how Blackberry kept saying anyone who hid would get detention and Saturday school. Lucia wrote everything down in her notebook and asked if she could record this part for the file. We both nodded, and Leah kept going, telling how kids were crying and begging to hide under desks, but Blackberry said they were being dramatic. My hands balled into fists hearing this again, but I kept them pressed against my legs. Lucia asked gentle questions about exactly what Blackberry said and did while the alarm was going off. Leah said he kept teaching math problems on the board, even when they could hear loud bangs from other rooms. The rage building in my chest had nowhere to go except into legal paperwork now. That afternoon, Alejandra called me to her office, where the prosecutor sat across the conference table with a thick folder. He laid out papers showing they were considering charges from simple trespassing all the way up to felony assault with a deadly weapon. The fire extinguisher counted as a weapon, apparently, even though I never swung it at anyone. Alejandra leaned forward and told me they were fishing, trying to scare me into taking whatever deal they offered first. The prosecutor kept his face blank while explaining how serious property damage charges could get when it involved a school. 3 days passed before we got official notice that the principal had filed for a restraining order against me. The papers claimed I was an ongoing threat to the school staff and that my attack on her was planned ahead of time. She wrote that I'd been angry about school policies for months and used the lockdown as an excuse to assault her. Reading her lies made my hands shake, but Alejandra said this was just her doubling down to protect herself. That same evening, my phone started blowing up with messages about a video online. Someone had posted Cameron's hallway footage on the local community Facebook page, and people were going crazy in the comments. Some parents said it proved I was right, while others claimed the video looked edited or didn't show the whole story. The district's lawyers got it taken down within 2 hours, but screenshots were already spreading everywhere. People picked apart every frame looking for evidence to support their side of the argument. The next morning, HR called to tell me my administrative leave was now unpaid until further notice. They said company policy required this when criminal charges were pending, and there was nothing they could do. My wife's face went white when I told her because her salary alone wouldn't cover our mortgage and bills. The health insurance question came up immediately, since we'd lose coverage in 30 days without my employment. Lucia suggested we create new routines to help Leah feel safer at home. We went to the hardware store and bought thick blackout curtains for her bedroom window. Leah helped me install them, testing how dark they made the room even in bright daylight. She asked if we could move her bed to the corner where she could see the door better. We spent the afternoon rearranging her whole room exactly how she wanted it. These small things seemed to calm her more than all our reassuring words ever could. Bryant McCullough scheduled an interview with Leah at the district office a week later. They put us in a room with a big mirror that was obviously one-way glass. Lucia sat next to Leah while Bryant asked questions that all seemed designed to make me look bad. He kept asking if I'd ever been angry at the school before, or if I'd talked about the principal at home. Every question tried to minimize what Blackberry did while making my actions seem crazy and violent. My fists stayed clenched in my pockets the whole time watching through that glass. Someone leaked an email to the newspaper showing the principal had cut the budget for master keys last year. She'd reduced the number of keys from 12 to 3 to save $400 on key management. The email showed she knew this could cause problems during emergencies, but decided the risk was worth the savings. My anger shifted from just Blackberry to the whole rotten system that let this happen. The teacher union rep went on local radio defending what he called Blackberry's calm first teaching approach. He said some teachers believed keeping students calm prevented panic better than hiding procedures. He called me unstable and dangerous, saying parents like me made schools less safe for everyone. The host barely pushed back. Just let him talk for 10 minutes about how teachers were the real victims here. 2 days later, a black sedan pulled up, and 2 women in blazers knocked on our door. They said they were from CPS doing a welfare check after getting reports about my temper around children. They walked through our house taking notes about everything while asking to speak with Leah privately. My wife and I sat in the kitchen listening to them question our daughter in the living room about whether she felt safe at home. They checked our refrigerator, looked in closets, examined Leah's room, and took photos of everything. After an hour, they said they found no concerns, but would be filing a report with their supervisor. The shame of being investigated like that sat heavy on my chest for days afterward. Alejandra called me 3 days later, asking me to come to her office immediately. I drove there with my hands shaking on the wheel, knowing something big was coming. She had papers spread across her desk and pushed a folder toward me when I sat down. "They're offering a plea deal," she said, while I read through the legal language. The prosecutor would drop the felony assault charges if I pleaded guilty to misdemeanor trespassing and vandalism. I'd get probation, community service, and have to pay for the damaged door and glass. My stomach turned reading the word guilty next to my name on those papers. Alejandra tapped the folder and reminded me that going to trial meant risking a felony conviction that would destroy my life. She pointed out that Leah needed stability right now, not a dad facing potential prison time. I stared at those papers for 20 minutes while she explained the risks of fighting this in court. The next morning, a thick envelope arrived from the police department marked confidential. Inside was the SWAT team's official report, with most of it blacked out with marker. One section they forgot to redact showed room 203 listed as secured on their initial sweep charts. The report said they skipped that room because their system showed the teacher had already implemented lockdown procedures. My hands crumpled the edges of the paper, seeing official confirmation they never even checked on those kids. The validation felt good for about 10 seconds before anger took over at how they described it. They called it a minor procedural oversight and said the room's status was adequately managed by staff. 2 weeks passed before the prosecutor's office called me in for a meeting. Bryant McCullough sat next to the prosecutor with a stack of photos on the table between us. The prosecutor slid the pictures toward me one by one, showing the art teacher in the hospital bed. Her face was wrapped in bandages and tubes ran down her throat. Her teenage kids sat beside the bed holding her hands while machines beeped around them. The prosecutor kept sliding more photos, showing her family crying in the waiting room. He told me she'd need 3 more surgeries and might never regain full use of her left arm. I knew he was trying to make me feel guilty, but all I could think was how this could have been prevented. If anyone had listened to me about room 203, maybe SWAT would have swept faster and caught the shooter sooner. That night, my wife and I got into our worst fight since this whole thing started. She wanted me to take the plea deal and move on with our lives. I wanted to fight it on principle because accepting any criminal charge felt like admitting I was wrong. Our voices got louder and louder until we were practically screaming at each other in the kitchen. Neither of us heard Leah come downstairs until she was standing in the doorway crying. "Please stop fighting," she sobbed, and we both froze, seeing her shoulders shake. The shame hit me harder than any prosecutor's photos ever could. My wife held Leah while I stood there, realizing my pride was hurting my daughter more than any plea deal would. The district called a press conference the next afternoon that played on every local channel. They announced new active shooter training protocols and updated lockdown procedures for all staff. The principal stood at the podium talking about leadership during crisis, while administrators nodded behind her. She never mentioned BlackBerry by name, but kept emphasizing how the district's quick response saved lives. They made it sound like I was the dangerous element they'd had to manage that day. The superintendent thanked the principal for her courage and presented her with some kind of commendation award. I had to turn off the TV when she started talking about the trauma I'd caused the students. 3 days later, I sat in the courthouse for my preliminary hearing wearing my only suit. The judge reviewed the evidence while I sat between Alejandra and my wife, trying not to fidget. After an hour of legal arguments, the judge announced he was dismissing the felony assault charges. He said there was insufficient evidence that I'd intended to harm the principal with that chair, but he maintained the misdemeanor trespassing and vandalism charges would proceed to trial. Alejandra called it a partial victory, but I still faced potential jail time and a criminal record. We met with a civil attorney that same week in a small office downtown. He'd already been contacted by 6 other parents from room 203 who wanted to sue the district. They all had kids with trauma symptoms and therapy bills piling up from BlackBerry's refusal to follow protocol. The attorney explained we could file a negligence lawsuit seeking damages and policy changes. The strategy would shift from just defending me to making the whole system accountable for what happened. More parents joined every day as word spread through the community about the potential lawsuit. Monday morning arrived, and Leah had to go back to the school for the first time since the shooting. The no-contact order meant I couldn't go within 500 feet of school property. I drove her to a spot 2 blocks away and watched her walk the rest of the way alone. Other parents walked their kids right up to the entrance, some holding hands, while I sat in my car watching through the windshield. Leah looked back once and waved before disappearing around the corner. I sat there for another hour making sure she didn't come running back. Cameron called that afternoon saying he'd organized 20 parents to speak at the next school board meeting. Since I couldn't attend due to the restraining order, he asked me to write a statement he could read. I spent 3 hours writing and rewriting 2 pages about what really happened in room 203. Cameron promised to play his hallway video right after reading my words to the board. Other parents were preparing their own statements about their kids' trauma and the district's failures. The board meeting was packed when Cameron told me about it later. He stood up during public comment and started reading my statement into the microphone. When he got to the part about BlackBerry threatening detention, several people in the audience gasped. Then he pulled out his phone and played the video on the projection screen. You could hear BlackBerry's voice clearly saying, "Detention for everyone," while kids cried in the background. Half the room erupted in angry shouts, while others applauded Cameron for showing the truth. The board president called a recess, and the members huddled in the corner whispering frantically. When they returned, they said they'd review the matter in closed session and adjourned without addressing anything. Parents kept shouting questions as the board members filed out through a back door. 2 weeks after that meeting, Bryant McCullough's investigation report arrived at my lawyer's office in a thick manila envelope. Alejandra called me to come in right away, and I took the bus downtown since my truck was still impounded as evidence. She flipped through the pages while I sat across from her desk, watching her face get tighter with each paragraph. The report admitted there was, quote, policy confusion during the incident, but recommended only additional training for staff. No disciplinary action for anyone. McCullough wrote that Mr. BlackBerry believed he was following an older protocol about maintaining calm first, and that the district bore some responsibility for not updating training materials. The principal had already gotten a copy and was telling everyone the report vindicated her completely, posting on the district website about how proud she was of her staff's performance under pressure. My hands shook, reading the conclusion that said while my concerns as a parent was understandable, my actions caused unnecessary chaos and trauma. 3 days later, my wife went to meet with the principal about getting Leah special accommodations for her anxiety and came home looking confused. She sat at our kitchen table going through her notes from the meeting and kept finding things that didn't match what actually happened. The principal had said I never tried calling the school, that I just showed up violent and angry without warning, but my wife had my phone records showing the call. The principal claimed BlackBerry immediately secured his classroom when the lockdown started, but we had Leah's time-stamped texts proving otherwise. My wife looked at me across the table and said she finally understood why I did what I did, that the school was rewriting everything to protect themselves. That conversation helped us stop fighting about whether I'd gone too far and start working together on what came next. The prosecutor called Alejandra the following Monday with an offer for deferred adjudication. If I pleaded guilty to misdemeanor trespassing and vandalism, completed 200 hours of community service, paid $5,000 in restitution, and stayed out of trouble for 2 years, the charges would be dismissed. Alejandra explained this meant no permanent criminal record if I completed everything successfully, but I'd have to admit guilt now. The thought of saying I was guilty of anything made my stomach turn, but she reminded me a trial could take another year, and Leah needed stability now, not later. I spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about it, weighing my need to fight against Leah's need for this to be over. My wife found me at 3 in the morning staring at Leah's bedroom door, and we both knew what I had to do. I called Alejandra the next day and told her to accept the deal. 2 weeks later, I stood in court wearing my only suit while the judge reviewed the plea agreement. She looked over her glasses at me and launched into a lecture about parents who think they know better than trained professionals, about taking the law into my own hands, about the chaos I caused. I bit down so hard on my tongue I tasted blood, but kept my mouth shut while she went on for 10 minutes. When she asked if I understood the terms, I just said yes and signed where they pointed. The agreement included a permanent stay-away order from the school property, $8,000 in total fines and restitution, and those 200 hours of community service. Walking out of that courthouse felt like swallowing broken glass, but at least we knew what the next 2 years looked like. That night, something amazing happened. Leah went to sleep in her own room with the lights off for the first time since the shooting. We heard her door close around 10, and my wife grabbed my hand so tight it hurt. We sat on our bed listening for any sounds of distress, but heard nothing except normal sleep breathing when we checked on her an hour later. It was such a small thing, but we held each other and celebrated quietly in our room, knowing we still had so far to go, but grateful for this one victory. 3 months passed with me doing community service every weekend at a food bank, while Leah slowly got better in therapy. Then Cameron called with news that made my jaw drop. The school board had quietly reassigned Blackberry to administrative duties at the district office with no student contact, and the principal had been placed on administrative leave after sustained pressure from parents. The official announcement used words like restructuring and new opportunities, but everyone knew what it really meant. It wasn't the accountability I wanted, them admitting what they did wrong, but at least they weren't in positions to hurt other kids. Cameron asked if I wanted to meet for coffee since I couldn't attend any school events, and we met at a place downtown where nobody from the district would see us. He looked tired and told me about the harassment he'd been facing for publicly supporting me, how other parents called him a troublemaker and his kid were excluded from birthday parties. We talked about setting boundaries and not letting this consume our entire lives, about protecting our families while still pushing for change. He said more parents were quietly grateful for what we'd done, but were too scared to say it publicly. A month later, the financial reality hit hard, and we had to sell my truck to cover the mounting legal bills. I'd already maxed out 2 credit cards, and the mortgage was getting harder to meet with all the fines and lawyer fees. Standing in the used car lot signing over the title felt like another piece of my old life disappearing. Now I took the bus to work every morning, getting up an hour earlier to make the connections, while co-workers pretended not to notice. My pride took hit after hit, but keeping our house mattered more than what I drove or what people thought. 4 more months crawled by, and the news had completely moved on to other stories, other tragedies, other scandals. Some neighbors still gave me looks when I walked to the bus stop, whispering to each other about what I'd done. But last week, Mrs. Hans from 2 houses down knocked on our door with a casserole and stood on our porch telling me she understood why I did what I did. She said if it had been her daughter, she would have done the same thing, and that took some of the weight off my shoulders, even though most people still avoided us. 2 weeks later, Cameron called me about a civil lawsuit some families were filing against the district and asked if I wanted to join without being the face of it. I signed the papers at a coffee shop downtown, while Cameron explained how 14 families had already committed and more were interested. The lawyer handling it said we had a strong case for negligence based on the documented policy failures and witness statements. My signature felt like doing something useful, instead of just being angry all the time. 3 days after that, my boss called and offered me my job back on probation, with a different position handling inventory, instead of customer accounts, but keeping the same pay. I accepted immediately, and started the next Monday, grateful to have income again, even if co-workers treated me differently now. The relief of getting regular paychecks again meant we could stop worrying about losing the house. A month passed, and I heard from Cameron that the district had installed new interior door locks in every classroom and sent out an updated protocol stating that hiding comes first during any lockdown with questions asked later. Knowing these changes might save some kid's life made the whole mess feel less pointless, even though it shouldn't have taken what happened to make them fix things. Spring came and Leah had her choir concert, but I couldn't go inside because of the restraining order, so I sat in the parking lot texting her funny messages about breaking legs and singing like nobody's watching. She sent me selfies in her choir robe and videos of her friends being silly backstage, which hurt to watch from outside, but seeing her smile again mattered more than my bruised feelings. After 6 months of weekly sessions, Lucia sat us down and explained that Leah was ready to reduce therapy to twice a month since she was managing her triggers better and sleeping through most nights. Leah still jumped when doors slammed or sirens went by, but she recovered faster each time and didn't need to check exits as much. We celebrated with ice cream even though it was just another Tuesday. The school board meeting was coming up, and even though I couldn't attend, I spent 3 nights writing a statement for Cameron to read about what happened and what changed afterward. I kept it factual without attacking anyone personally or making it about my anger, because this needed to be about fixing problems, not settling scores. Cameron read it word for word while they recorded the meeting and posted it online later, where it got thousands of views and comments from parents everywhere dealing with similar fears. 2 weeks after that, we were eating dinner when Leah laughed at something on her phone and showed us a stupid video of a cat falling off a counter. My wife reached over and squeezed my hand while we watched Leah giggle at her phone like a normal teenager. Our kitchen still felt different from before, and sometimes we all got quiet remembering, but the laughter was coming back slowly. That night before bed, I pulled out my phone and looked at Leah's saved texts from that day one more time. Dad, there's a lockdown, and someone has a gun, and all the rest that I'd read hundreds of times. I closed the phone without deleting them, because they were part of what happened, but I didn't need to read them anymore. I got into bed next to my wife and fell asleep without getting up to check the locks or windows for the first time in 8 months. The next morning felt normal in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Thanks for sticking with me through all this. It's definitely been a ride sharing these moments together. I'll see you around next time. Like the video, it helps more than you think.